Welcome to How Does Your Garden Grow? I hope you enjoy this informative gardening program. Fall is the perfect time to add spring bulbs to your garden. The burst of color they provide will signal the beginning of spring. Christine is going to discuss proper planting, animal damage, and color combos here at Weston Nurseries with How Does Your Garden Grow?
I'm Christine. Nice to meet you. Perennial salesperson here. Give you a quick background before we get started. I have been working professionally as a gardener for about 10 years. This is my first season here. Before this, I had my own business, so I was almost strictly gardening, not landscape per se. And I want to tell you all of this because my nails are perfectly clean and my knees are clean, so I want you to believe that I'm a real gardener. We're going to talk about bulbs this morning. We're going to go through some basics on what they are, how to plant, and then we're going to talk more specifically about how to give you more color in your gardens. That's going to be our focus today. Not a super long presentation, but then we're also going to talk back and forth, whatever you like. Okay? Everybody ready? You sure? Did you get a handout? Right behind you. Okay. So we're going to talk, like I said, we're going to talk about some of the essentials. Where is everybody in the gardening world? How do you feel? How many feel that they're beginners or novices? Okay. And how many feel that they're intermediate, a little more advanced? Good. Does anybody feel like they could come up and do this for me because I'll switch places? No. Okay. So I am going to do some basics for everybody, and hopefully we'll all learn something. Okay. So as you can see on the handout, I did talk about the essentials. When most people, I think of bulbs, we think about daffodils and tulips first. Tulips especially put on this amazing show. When you go to a formal garden and you see all those tulips, it's amazing. And one of the things that they do is they plant in bulk, okay? And we're going to talk about that a lot more later. We don't often see just a few here and there. It doesn't create an impact, and that's what we're looking for when we're using bulbs, okay? The other reason that we use a lot of bulbs is to extend our seasons. Okay, how many people have something starting in their garden in May? How many people have flowers in May? Does anybody have anything in April? How about March? Crocuses. Okay, I have March through November, sometimes even late February. And it's mainly because of bulbs in the spring and then other things in the fall, okay? So great to have a lot more color going on in those dreary March days, okay? Okay, so daffodils and tulips are larger, generally speaking, okay? Kind of the bread and butter, typically, of what you see. I don't know if you realize it, but many come in range as low as 4 to 6 inches for some daffodils, which are adorable. And then some grow as tall as 30 inches, especially tulips. Most daffodils top off at about 20 to 24 inches, somewhere in the 16 to 24 range. Those taller tulips are absolutely gorgeous, especially both far away and close up. So if you're looking to make an impact, not necessarily right at your front door, those taller tulips a little bit further away are really going to do the job for you if you're trying to bring some color a little further away from where you walk every day, okay? There are many different kinds. I brought in a few. This is a good example. This is a mixture. Some of them are multicolored, okay? Some are solid. This is great. It's a nice mix. Some of them are all fluffy. Some of them are lily, which means that they open wide and they look like a lily instead of a tulip, which are really, really pretty. Like I said, I have more examples right back here. The daffodils, you will see, as I said, some of them are teeny tiny and they're great. We like to call them socks and shoes to go with other plants. Really nice and low. I know it's a funny name. And then they get bigger, and you see some of the more standard ones, which are, again, like I said, 14, 16 inches to about 20 inches. Again, forming a really nice grouping in an area. Sometimes you want to go with a single color, which is great. A lot of times you want to go with a mix. What we have here are both. I brought in some minis for you, and then I also brought in a bunch of mixes. So basically the company does the job for you on what it might look like. So another thing on mixes is that you get a longer period of time that it blooms. It'll start a little earlier and go all the way, usually 6 to 8 weeks, depending on what the mix is. Okay, so that's really nice too. I don't know if you know that. There are some that are much earlier than others. So it is nice to know, if you can, on what's an early bloomer and what's later. Tulips have a shorter period. They're more in a 3 to 4 week range. Daffodils is at least 6, sometimes 8 weeks, depending on the spring. And it's New England, so spring is not always, gee, this says it's going to be by the 3rd week of April that these are going to bloom. They're not up yet. That's spring in New England for you. So you can't always rely on that. We don't have that luxury. Both tulips and daffodils are done in the fall because they need that cold period in the ground. I know there's a fancy name for it. I can never remember what it is. Is it stratification? Yeah. Thank you. So they need that cold period in the ground. In some parts of the country, like on the southeast coast, they have to buy them pre-cooled, or you have to put them in the refrigerator for weeks at a time in order to achieve that. So you cannot plant new daffodils or tulips in the spring. It doesn't work. Okay, they need that cold period. And that really helps. And that also talks about depth, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay? Anybody have any quick questions right now?
So you can't ever plant them in the spring and just with the expectation that they would come up like next year?
No, the problem is that they have a lot more opportunity to rot out in that case, unfortunately, than if you plant them in the fall. So that's why we always recommend in the fall.
To do Instacolor, yeah.
But usually they're already started,
Yeah.
rather than a bulb. True.
Already bloom and
Right.
put them in a nice spot where you want to see them.
You are,
Then
yes.
you stick it in the ground.
Then you stick it in the, true, absolutely.
When you do a mass planting,
Yes.
how far apart do you put
Well,
those 50 bulbs?
We'll talk about it in a minute, in a few minutes. Okay? And I actually have a little hands-on for you. Okay? All right, so let's talk about some of the smaller ones as well. You've got hyacinth, which people love for Easter time. They're lovely. I didn't bring any in, but again, they're lovely. They come in a mix. I tend to be a purist with hyacinth. I like to put all the same color in one area, all the blues. There's blues, whites, pinks, purples, almost red kind of thing. I'm a purist in that way. However, you can always mix them. I just tend to to do a lot in one area, so that's why I like a single color. Everything else I mix, interestingly. I know. Grape hyacinths or muscari are the little itty-bitty, teeny ones. That's why they're called grape hyacinth. They tend to be maybe 4 to 6 inches out of the ground. A lot of times people use those in a large swath, perhaps under a deciduous tree before it leaves out. Or just in a large grouping. Again, you can get a lot of color from a little tiny bulb. Same thing with crocuses. Can kind of just throw them in everywhere in little pockets in little different areas. So they're really nice to just have that little extra color. Okay. All right. Let's talk more about the other varieties, and I'm going to go get what they look like. Excuse me 1 second. Okay. The first one I'm going to talk about is one of my favorites is Camassia, or Camassia. This is a lovely, can everybody see these come in whites, Purple's a little more blue than this as well. Very, very pretty blues. This is a great versatile bulb in that it's moderately tall. It's a great companion to irises or something of that same May time frame, so a little bit later than some of the other bulbs we were just talking about. Really, really nice to add in. They spread slowly. They don't spread quickly, but they will spread slowly. But there's just a really pretty plant that people don't think about. Also, they can tolerate quite a bit of shade as well. So not a nice option for you if you have a little more shade than sun once everything leaves out, okay? Very nice. Same thing with hyacinthoids, which is Spanish bluebells. Let's call them Spanish bluebells, okay? These, again, shockingly, they're mostly blue. There are some pinks that are here and some whites. Again, I prefer the blues. They're really lovely. These can go almost into deep shade. So if you have a moderate amount of shade, these are great. Love to mix these in where your hostas are going to come up. These are going to come up first. They also have really nice leaves that come up. The foliage is pretty nice as they're coming up. It's kind of dainty. It's nicer than like a daylily or something like that, but similar to looking at, a little bit nicer. So really, again, very versatile. Can tolerate sun if you have it, but also terrific under the shady areas, okay? We'll talk a little bit more about that right now. When you have an area that is shady because of the leaves, because of deciduous, you actually can get away with a lot of different types of varieties of bulbs. Tulips, not as much. They really want full sun all the time. But a lot of daffodils you can do in that area that's going to be shady starting at the end of May, as long as they're early. If it's an earlier bloomer, they need the sun, they want the sun in the spring, in late winter into spring as they're coming up. But once they're up, they're going to be finishing up. The leaves are going to come in. So again, it's an area where it's going to be a darker area later on in the season, but in the early part of the season, you can really make it shine and really gorgeous. So something to think about, okay? All right. How many of you people use allium? I have an example for you. All right, so allium are often sold, the big ones. Does everybody see these? You see them coming out? They're very often 36 inches tall, size of a softball, some of them. Look at how big the bulb is, okay? And that was a great question because I am going to demonstrate. There are also allium that are very low and very small. Very pretty. There's a type called Janine, allium molly, called Janine, which is a beautiful little yellow, and it has the same look, the tiny little florets, but it's very, very low, 8 inches. There are also some that have these large bulbs like this, but again are 12 inches tall, and that's something where you plant them and everybody who sees them is like, what the heck is that thing? Beautiful leaves as well, unlike the taller allium, which the leaves are really not so very nice, very boring. But I'm going to show you, I brought in a single allium, okay? It's from the onion family, okay? So this particular one has all of its roots at the bottom, all right? So usually there is a side that is sort of like a garlic, okay? See how so it's got like that base on it, okay? Versus the opposite side, which has the point, if you will. Okay, just go that really quick. So not rocket science, but a little bit different in case you're wondering, in case you're not sure. See how it's got that base on it versus the top, okay? And see, they look just like an onion. They're ready to peel, chop up. That's what they smell. This one's not quite as fresh. When you first take them out, they really do smell like onion. So they're really easy. If you're in doubt about how, and I'm going to show you some daffodils in a couple minutes, but if you're in doubt about which is the top, you're not sure, some of them are really crazy and you really don't know, just put them on their sides. They'll figure it out. Okay? Just lay them on their sides, and one way or the other, the roots will come out and steady themselves. Okay? So don't stress over it too much.
Plant them on their side.
You lay them on their sides when you're putting them in.
Ground.
Yes, yes. Okay.
I thought you meant put them on a table and they'll tip.
Yeah, you know, you just do that and they'll show you. No, no. Thank you. As you're laying them out. As I said, they're from the onion family, and they create an amazing impact. These are one of the few that I will recommend, the Fritillaria being another one, that you can plant as individuals instead of in groupings to really get impact. You can I've done this many times in gardens, is I just put 5 pretty randomly in a large garden space, like 20 by 10, and you see them every single time. Every time you will see something this big and this pretty. And I also recommend, once they brown out, they stay, all these florets will dry off, and you will have a brown thing there, a circle. Keep them up. They're really cute. Some people actually gather them up and spray paint them and keep them, and they'll use them for fall or even winter pots and stuff like that. So really kind of fun to have. I actually have used one that's called Christopher, and it's very open, but it's also about this big. It's a good 10 inches across. Not very tall, but that one I like to keep after it dries out because it's very, very pretty. So a little different from this one. Not quite as interesting because it's not as full, but definitely, allium, definitely one to really do a little research and bring some in, okay? More expensive because they are so impact and they are slow to grow, but worth it, okay? Anybody have questions? Hi.
Hello, is my local groundhog going to like any of those more so than any other?
Well, that's what we're going to get to. So, interestingly, this is, because it's from the onion family, I don't know of any critter that enjoys eating these, okay? They are smelly, they don't taste very good, so nearly all the time they will be left alone. So that's a good question. Was it?
My question was for the timing of the allium versus the daffodil versus the tulip. What's going to bloom first, second, and third?
Great question. Thank you. Typically, the smallest of the bulbs are going to go first. So like we said crocuses, the little muscari, the grape hyacinth, and then you'll start the daffodil season. So daffodils start as early as early March, again, depending on our spring, and run all the way through the end of May. Tulips are a little tighter, usually into April through May. So daffodils are first. Alliums are a later, either late spring or early summer. So usually when most of the rest of your perennials are up and doing things, then you'll get the allium. So wait for them. Don't pull them, as I have done. I planted drumstick allium, which are about this big, a little bigger than a quarter, and they're really nice, but they're just this wisp that comes up, and the first year after I planted them, I pulled about half of them, and then I went, wait a second, I think I planted these. And that's actually one of the notes on here is take notes for yourself and remember where you put things, because otherwise you'll be pulling things. So the second year when I let them out, it was beautiful. I had all these great drumstick allium everywhere. Anybody have any questions on what we've covered so far on the types of them? There are many, many different kinds of bulbs out there that you can do. I'm doing the highlights. I'm kind of doing the stars right now, okay? Definitely, we could talk all morning about them.
Anything that will really survive shade?
Anything that will survive, absolutely. Definitely the Spanish bluebills will do well in the shade. If you're careful about where you put them, both the camassia and daffodils will do well as long as they're a little bit earlier. okay, on the daffodils. If you pick a later one, chances are that your shade is going to come in and they won't do as well.
My
So
shade's always in.
your shade's always in? So no, then you're really looking at a much smaller grouping, right? Scilla, which we also have next door. Does anyone know Scilla or Pushkinia? Very, very similar. Very low, ground cover type plant, pretty, lots of beautiful color, and they will spread. And those both can do very well in a part shade situation. Deep shade is not where bulbs live for a couple of different reasons, okay? So I'm gonna, bless you, I'm gonna go to planting tips, okay? So we're planting according to size. My big giant allium wants to be 8 to 10 inches deep, okay? Boy, that's deep. Wow. Am I going to make it with this? No way. No way. This is a great tool, but I'm not going to make it for an allium with this guy. I might be able to. Does anyone use the drill piece? Might be able to do this, right? Just, you know, you just hook it into your drill, you drill it down, you pull it up, you have a lovely, lovely hole, okay? They work really well. It works better if your soil is already worked. So this is actually great to use in an established garden because you know exactly where you're going. You might hit a few roots from other plants, but generally speaking, you're going to be fine and it comes right back up, okay? So this is a really nice tool. But I will tell you, whoops, when I am doing, I take the big guy out. Okay, even for allium, typically most are we've got about 8 inches here, sometimes even 10, all right? So that's how deep they want to go. Very often, because I usually plant thousands of bulbs every year, I want to go as quickly as I can. So I'm usually slicing straight down and pushing out, and then I pop it in, I pull out, tap, tap, I'm done. Okay, and when you're doing that 60 times a day, etc., it works. Sometimes I have to do it twice to make that cut. Okay, question?
I do have a question, because you just said that you plant bulbs over and over again every year.
Yes.
And so my question pertains to which bulbs are going to naturalize and not need to be replanted?
Not need to be replanted. Okay.
And
What I
which is other bulbs
Sure.
that are gonna have a short life?
Okay, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But what I actually meant was that because I do it for lots of people, I tend to do it more often. So I'm not going to put this away. So we talked about alliums. Now I'm going to talk about daffodils. Question?
How deep are the allium?
8 to 10 inches for allium. Yes. The smaller the bulb, the less deep you have to be. Okay? So crocuses, 1 to 2 inches max. Very, very, very low. Same thing with, thank you, with snowdrops, or with the muscari, the grape hyacinth, etc. With daffodils and tulips, they basically want the same thing. You okay? You got a little water? They basically want the same thing. So they average about 2 to 3 inches tall. So they want to be down about 6 inches, okay, and sit down. And again, they're easy to see which is up and which is down because they have a lovely cone at the top and a nice flat bottom. So they're nice and easy to see how they go in. But yes, we're talking 6 inches. So again, I pull out Mr. Shovel. This can go down easily 6 inches, as well as the other tool. And if I'm doing one, I will definitely use this. However, I go in groupings, okay? And I highly recommend that you do as well. When you see, again, I'm going to go to, you know, the pictures that you see or the places you go and my goodness, how did they make this happen? Well, they take 50s like this and they plant. And I'm going to show you how to do it, okay? Whoops. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Holliston. Yes, okay. here's how I do this. I make a trough. Here's my trough. I've dug my trough. I've dug 6 to 8 inches down. I actually sometimes go a little deeper, okay? So this is about 6 inches deep, all right? I'll show you in a second. I put my mix in. Now, the recommendations are 3 to 4 inches apart, okay? I did it again. This is 50 bulbs. I have now planted my 50 bulbs. That's it, okay?
You don't stand them up.
I tend to stand them up a little bit, but they're really not that fussy.
Again, the sideways thing, right?
The sideway thing, they're gonna figure it out. But if you want to take a few minutes and stand them up, sure. But this is how I plant I plant 50 at a time.
Would you plant them in that much space, or is that you're just using that as a?
No, I would plant them in this much space. I plant them 1 inch to 2 inches apart. The impact is amazing, okay? They're not expensive. This bag is $26 or something like that, you know? These specifically are daffodils. Tulips, I might space just a little further apart, but perhaps not. And I could easily mix in tulips in this. I'm just trying to give you an example. So hold on one second. Anybody else? Can you see? Okay. So I'm not kidding. I don't normally. Oh yes. I don't normally go in a circle. Normally I line, so it's usually more narrow. But that's it. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be a very quick process. Okay. So what was your question?
It's probably a little more advanced. So when I start getting a hole of new blooming in the middle, that's when I'm gonna.
That's when you're going to split. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good question. Yes. So are you all? You all look really surprised. You can certainly. We sell in 10s. We also sell in 25s. Okay, 25 makes a nice display, but if you follow the rules, you're going to cover a large space with this, and you're not going to have an amazing display. So think about cutting it in half and just either using more bulbs or making your space smaller that you're planting. Okay, and you will get an amazing display.
That's exciting.
It is exciting. That's how it happens. Okay, so now let's talk about what's going to last and what's not, and then we'll get back to planting, more specifics about planting. Tulips in general are not perennial. The vast majority of the bulbs that we're talking about this morning are perennial. They're going to come back year after year for at least 3 to 5 years. Okay, even allium. Maybe 3 to 5 years. They do tend, unfortunately, to fade away, but they're so worth it. Tulips, on the other hand, may last 2 years, 2 seasons, may last 3 seasons, especially the Darwin, which is the closest to a perennial that tulips have. Many of them only last a year. So just remember that when you're doing it. But again, when you're, it's not marked. When you're putting in, 25 of them and you're getting this glorious display, think about how many perennials that you would put in. If you're gonna spend $30 to $40 putting 3 perennials in that same spot, it's worth it. The pricing, it works. I know people don't think about it that way. They think, oh my gosh, $1 for a tulip, but you're really getting a beautiful, beautiful display.
Plus some perennials have a short life themselves.
Some perennials do have a short life. True.
Up in 2 years.
True. Right. Okay. So we've very carefully planted our daffodils. Okay. What I like to do is, and I have a couple bags here. I have straight lobster compost, and I also have the bumper crop. Depending on how good your soil is, use what you prefer. The bumper crop is kind of a mix. It's got a high. The bumper crop has a high content of compost, so this is a very, very nice mixture depending on if you compost regularly. Really, really nice. If you do compost regularly and you just want to get it a little deeper into the ground, then you can use the straight lobster compost. There is no wrong answer, okay? But I like to do a full layer of compost, an inch or two, depending on my soil, with the bulbs.
Under your bulbs or over your bulbs?
I actually do it with. So when I'm doing it in this way, and I pour them in, and I literally do that. I take whatever I have and I gather them up and I shake them up because it's going to be a mixture. I mix tulips and daffs, absolutely. And then I toss them in this way. That is when I put in, because there's lots of space in here, you know, that's when I put it in and really settle everything in, okay? So depending on what you're doing, daffodils don't get eaten by critters. Tulips do. One of the reasons that I mix them. It does save the tulips to some extent. However, this year, with so many squirrels around, all bets are off. So I'm gonna, does anyone else have any questions specifically about planting?
So they're in with the dirt.
They're in with the dirt.
You can still see them.
Now it's time,
Compost them.
right, that's right. So then you don't really see them. It all settles in, then you put more dirt on. Right. So this is 6 inches deep. That's why I chose this. This is 6 inches down, this is 6 inches deep. So this is what it would look like, and this is all going to get covered in dirt. You're going to get a low amount of compost here, and then you're going to put what you took out back into here. Okay? So what I usually do, even with crocuses, even with any of the small stuff, I will do troughs. I will do, a foot by 36 inches. And I will pull all that out, and I will lay down my bulbs, and then I'll just cover it right back up again. Okay? That's for a mass planting. We'll talk about mixing them in just a minute.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
you do your alum.
Yes, yes. So we'll talk about mixing in a minute. Okay? Any other specifics on this? Okay?
I'm a member of the Ashland Garden Club.
Yes,
I'm their VP.
yes,
We planted 100 red tulip bulbs
yes.
at the Ashland Post Office.
And did you do it with like this?
No.
Okay,
Oh,
good.
shovel.
A shovel, okay.
6 came up.
Well, all right, so let's do that. What happened? Only 6 tulips came up. Couple things. It's on your notes, okay? Most of New England has nice, well-draining soil. However, there are some areas that are really badly compacted, which possibly is the issue here. So sandy isn't usually an issue. If your ground is very wet normally, it is not an area for bulbs. Bulbs will not survive with sitting water at all. So it does need to be well draining. Usually it's not an issue in New England. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes it can be. There are pockets of heavy clay or part clay. If you're in a newer house, you may have really awful soil below the 4 inches that that the builder put on, something like that, okay? But if it's well draining, that shouldn't have been the problem. Probably tulips are delicious to most small animals. So let's talk about what we can do, okay? Now I'm a master gardener. I tend to be an organic gardener as much as possible. So I try to stick with that. So here they are. Okay. So some things we can try, okay? And usually they're quite effective. As you're planting, you may want to put down, I lost it. You may want to put in, as an old-time Yankee gardener told me, you may want to put a little bit of blood meal right on top of what you've just planted. In the ground, not on top of the ground, okay? You may want to put some blood meal in. You may want to do a spray, like this, in the ground. You may want to use, I brought,
When you say in the ground, do you mean when?
I mean right on top of, before you put the soil back on, after the compost, okay? You might want to do that. I brought in, I can't find it now, but I brought in some red pepper from home. And I said, you can just use red pepper. It's a good deterrent because you will get some critters who are going to dig them up right away, okay, get into the ground. So these are all good deterrents for that. After they're completely planted and you've straightened things out, here it is. This is crab and lobster shell cut up, okay? If you spread this down, yes, I guess it's a relatively new product, but you can easily see what it looks like, okay? Yes, the small animals, they will get cut up and they will just stop, okay? I'm going to pass this around for you. Yeah, dicotyledonous. It is, but this is even much stronger than that. Yeah, this stuff is great. We just brought this in, so if you want to take a look at that. You put it on the top. If you're going to then mulch, this would go under the mulch. Okay, so this is a great opportunity to stop. And again, this is in the fall. Okay, and again, same thing if you're very concerned. But usually, what we just talked about in the ground and that on top is going to be enough to stop in the fall. Okay, come the spring, again, whatever you're doing, if you have deer or rabbit or groundhog, unfortunately, you do want to use some sort of a repellent. I brought the deer repellent specifically. You can spray, you can use granules. There's a lot of different things. The biggest thing with this is consistency. Anytime you're using a repellent, you need to be consistent every 7 to 10 days because it does wear off, unfortunately. Okay? Oh yeah, and I brought the big heavy duty spray one as well. Okay?
Did you spray that on the bulbs?
No, I would spray this on the ground around them because in the spring the bulbs are going to start coming up, and I had it to happen this year. I've never had it happen before, but my tulips were just about open and then they were gone. Okay, so if you've experienced this, then you need one of these great repellent products, okay? And that will help a great deal. If you're extremely worried and you really want to go the extra course, you can always, in the ground, you can always do mesh. You can always do very tight wire mesh in the area that you're going to plant. So if you were to do this, you would either do a whole cage, make a cage, or do wire mesh, tuck it in around it. 6 to 8 inches deep is pretty deep for any critter, any kind of vole. That's really deep, which is part of the reason why you want, if you can, you go a little extra deep with tulips. But you could cover this with mesh. That is probably what the major gardens do. The botanic gardens probably do that to make sure.
What do you mean by mesh?
I mean wire mesh.
Wire?
Yes.
Like chicken wire?
Chicken wire, but it needs to be very, very tight. 1/4 inch or tighter. Very, very tight because voles and such are very small. They'll be easily get through.
Would you put the hardware cloth under the bulbs as well as on top and in a fence around?
Yes, you can do a full cage, or you can just do the top, but just make it a little bit bigger than the area that you're planting. Okay, good question. Unfortunately, we don't sell that. There's different ways you can get it, though. You can get it online. You can certainly get it at a bigger box store as well. Although we hate to send you there. Hate to send you there. Okay. No one has asked me. This is good. This is an interesting question. Yes.
So there's a difference between the spray, is there a different place that you put the spray as opposed to the blood?
Is there a different place? The blood meal you want as close as possible to your plants. The sprays or any of the repellents you want slightly around them for an area. You can do individual plants, but typically you want to protect a larger area than that.
Oh, like
Does that-
invisible thing.
Sort of, yes. Does that make sense?
Sort of, I just was wondering what level.
These are all above ground. These are all above ground. The blood meal can be right on top of the ground. Okay? And all the directions are on here as well.
So that wouldn't go under your,
This can go both in the hole in the fall or under the mulch or on top of the mulch, either way.
so if it goes in the hole in the fall, is it above the compost?
Is it above the compost? Yes, right on top. Yep. Yep, it doesn't matter if it touches the bulb. Yes.
Where would you put the pepper flakes?
Same thing. I would put them right on top in the hole with the bulbs as you're planting. Okay? So it's a deterrent for anything that's burrowing down to get to them.
So We have trouble with squirrels, especially on tulips.
Yes, yes. So if this is when you're planting in the fall, okay? You want to leave them alone in the spring. In the spring, then you want to move to these other deterrents, repellents like this, to prevent them from eating them. Okay, that is one of the reasons why I mix daffodils and tulips often, because they don't eat daffodils. Daffodils don't taste very good to anybody apparently, and so it will protect the tulips to some degree. I'm not saying that they're not going to literally squeeze around the daffodils and jump in and eat the tulips. I'm not saying that. They may very well, but it will provide some protection for them. Okay, so one of the things we haven't talked about, no one has asked me, is how and when do we fertilize? Okay. Now again, I don't fertilize in the fall. However, as I'm planting, easily you can. And a lot of people have a great deal of success. I have 3 different products here. Let me move these back. Okay. 3 different products here, all of which work very well. Okay. First, we're going to start with bone meal, tried and true. Okay. Again, follow the directions as you're planting. Adding bone meal, it again builds on what's already in the bulb. Everything that the bulb needs is in it, the energy and so forth. So the bone meal helps bring that out. As does the bulb tone. Similar, just has a few more ingredients in it. One of which is to help it grow after it's in, okay? Next spring. Biotone, does anyone use Biotone regularly? Relatively new product, but I'm a huge believer. And actually, in fact, we all are now. Biotone works and it helps plants to root, okay? So it makes them stronger through their rooting. A stronger root, a plant that's got that strong root system going is going to be a better plant overall, okay? So a lot of people have switched and gone straight to a biotone as they're planting. It's not going to affect the bulb in the fall, but it will affect it in the spring when it starts to actually grow, and it will help it, everything that it needs will be available, okay? So you've got 3 different products that you can use in the fall if you like. In the spring, again, the biotone is slightly less effective because they're all the way down in the ground, but both the bulb tone and the bone meal mixed into the top inch of soil will significantly help as they're growing up through the soil. Okay? So definitely the spring, excuse me, definitely the spring for fertilizing. And I'm sorry, everybody yells at me here because I tend not to fertilize anything. But you can definitely also do it as you're planting, okay? I do compost all the time. I always plant with compost. And the reason that I'm not, I am advocating for fertilizer, absolutely, but I looked up 3 or 4 different sources to talk about this. Chicago Botanical and University of Chicago, both in the same city, and they recommended different ways to plant with fertilizer in the fall, and I was like, that doesn't help me. So, you know, if you're a person who likes to add some fertilizer, go for it, okay? And these are all organic choices, which are all very, very good, okay? All right. I do in the spring, but not in the fall, because I use so much compost that I really have amazing soil. In my garden areas, not everywhere, but in my garden areas, I have really, really good soil, and I'm just constantly top dressing and adding it when I plant. So I do tend to use less than the average gardener.
Have you moved to the biotone though?
I have moved to the biotone, and it has made a big difference. I did do comparative. I put in 5 of these. I used 2 with biotone and 3 without, and the 2, actually I separated them. The 2 were definitely bigger the first year than the other 3. Very big proponent of the biotone. It really does what it's supposed to do. It makes me very excited, and it's still organic, so yay, we all win. All right, so just a few more things, okay? Again, as I mentioned, note where you planted what, because depending on what it is and you're not familiar with it, you might be like, what the heck is this thing? And either cut it or pull it out, and then it's too late, and you realize, oh, that's going to be a beautiful bulb, not, and you're going to throw it away, okay? So just try to keep notes on that. Definitely mix your varieties, colors, and sizes. One of the things that I love to do is I love to use the mini daffodils and the little muscari, the little grape hyacinth, together. I have tete-a-tetes, thalia, which is really pretty, jetfire, which has a little bit of orange in it, and there's minnow, which is, they're teeny, teeny, tiny, I'm talking tiny little, lovely little lemon yellow. Mix those all in, and you get this beautiful, granted it's a small display, but if you're doing it somewhere where you walk regularly, boy, are you going to be happy. I did a small area, maybe 36 inches around. It's kind of a triangle area, and I wish I had done like 3 times that size, because the display the last 2 years has just been phenomenal, and I just love it. They're all about this big, but I walk by there every day with my dogs, and I'm like, this is gorgeous, it's so adorable. So just keep that in mind, where you walk, where you want it to be seen. One of the companies, one of the speakers that I've listened to on bulbs has said that he calls it a 55-mile-per-hour bulb plant, because you can see it and you're like, wow, look at that as you're going by. So think about that, where it might be, you might want that real impact. Maybe it's in your backyard where now it's spring and you get to sit out on your deck again, and you're going to see it from way across the yard, okay? Something like that. So think about that. It really adds a huge amount of color to your spring gardens, okay? We'll talk about into your perennial gardens in just a minute. I really want to avoid little soldiers. Do not plant, as I'm sure we have all done, as I have done in years past, 1 tulip here and 1 tulip here and 1 tulip here, because that's what you're going to get. You're going to get 1 and 1, and maybe the rabbit's going to eat that one, and then you're going to get 1. It's not the look that you want, okay? When you plant 10 in this area that you're going to plant 3, the impact is going to be completely different, and the look you're going to love, rather than, oh, that's nice, okay? Maybe you're not covering as big an area, but the look of it is going to be so much nicer. So this is my advice to you on that, okay? So let's talk about adding into perennial gardens. Does anyone have any questions so far, any additional? Okay, I love to have questions as we go. Yes?
I'm just going to comment on the muscari, because I love it too.
Yeah.
I planted it, and it's gorgeous, and that cobalt blue
Yes.
floret.
Yes.
It's so striking, and as small as it comes up, it still can be visually seen from
It
a
is.
great distance. But trial and error, and this is a tip, if anyone plants muscari, it dies right down to the ground come July. So when I was reworking that bed, and I was working on the soil, I started pulling it out, because all the foliage died and didn't realize it was there.
Right.
But then
And it's so low,
cool
yeah.
weather, it all comes back up again in
Yes.
vengeance and flushes completely out. So
Yes.
right now in the fall, my muscari is very thick and lush. The foliage, not the
Right.
foliage.
It looks like very pretty grass all around. And crocuses do that too. If you're seeing a lot of stringy grass looking, those are your bulbs coming back up. Thanks, Nancy. And they also naturalize nicely as well. The muscari does. And it's true, that blue in spring, sometimes it'll get a little bit of snow back on it again. It's just amazing looking. Yeah.
Do you advise trying to separate daffodil bulbs after they have put out daughters?
Yes, as a matter of fact, thank you. If you're like I am and you're cheap, and I get a bulb like this is out of the 50 that I just did, okay? I very often will separate them and have 51 or 52, depending on their size. This one's a little bit small. I might let this one go, but definitely this one. This is half the size of the original mom, so I will separate these. I will still plant them quite close, but I will definitely separate them and get more. Yes.
I was really thinking after a few years when they.
When you go back in?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. That's We don't have time for that much talk. So, but I do want to talk a little bit more about using them specifically in a garden that's already planted, okay? When we're talking about doing this kind of thing, this is a kind of a new planting, an area that might already just be mulch right now, and you're really making it a lot prettier. When you're adding them into perennial gardens, do not be afraid of damaging, be a little tiny bit afraid, but don't really worry about damaging the plants that you already have, okay? You should know, generally speaking, where your plants are, but in a garden, a hosta garden, that's a later garden. Things don't even start popping up until May. Imagine putting in some of the, the Camassia, or especially the Spanish bluebells, things like that. You're going to have a lot of color, you're going to have a lot of green and a lot of flowers before anything else really starts to even come up and flush out. So the same thing in a perennial garden. If you've timed it in a certain way, most of your color starts in June. If you're adding in some daffodils, even in 5s or 10s, into an area where something else is going to flush out and cover it completely, that's fine, because the daffodil is going to disappear by the time the other plant is all full and up and starting to flower. The daffodil itself will just be completely gone, okay? Does that make sense to people? If you, I don't know, have you grown them before? Do you know what I mean? Okay, so let me use my big allium. So your big allium is here, okay? It has its leaves, which I said, they're nice at the beginning. They turn kind of ratty pretty quickly, and you want to cut them off as soon as they start to brown. But your allium comes up like this, so it's one tiny little stalk, okay? You can put that almost anywhere, okay? Not in the middle of a plant, certainly, but if you have 3 or 4 plants around, you can certainly put an allium right in the middle. You can also do the same thing with daffodils or tulips in smaller amounts. Like I said, even 5 to 10 will make an impact before those other plants start getting really, really big. A Russian sage is easy to plant around. Sometimes daylilies, daffodils and daylilies, go together like peanut butter and jelly. They're super easy. They complement one another. They have different timetables. It's perfect. So you get a long succession. Okay, so don't be afraid to put them in the middle of a garden as long as the height requirements are right. Okay, don't put the little baby minnow daffodils that are only going to be 6 inches. Not a good idea to put them in the middle of your bed, because other things will start coming up and you won't get the impact. So those would be near the front. But some of the other ones that are much taller, especially the tulips, will have a beautiful impact. If you're organized enough. Again, being more seasoned gardener, I know what colors are coming in. So I will plant that color tulip next to a plant that's going to come up and also be purple. So my cone flowers, my echinacea, are going to come up and they're going to be purple and they're going to be 24 inches tall. I'm going to plant purple and white tulips that are going to reflect what those echinacea are going to look like in a couple of months, just as as kind of a reminder that they're there. And everything coming together really, really looks beautiful. So don't be afraid to put them, mix everything in, okay? Just be aware of the sizes, the heights of everything. So this is, you have a good way to start in March and get all the way through. And by May, when things are starting to come up and flower and look good, and by June, you've already had 3 solid months of flowers. Okay, what's your question?
Would you, something that's going to come up earlier,
Mm-hmm.
would you specifically put that in the front in a mixture like that, and then do another area of something that's going to come up later, further back? You wouldn't mix them all together like that, you know what I mean?
If you're in an established perennial garden that already has plants in it, and you followed, generally speaking, you followed the small, medium, large planting, I would stick to that with the bulbs, because some plant, and off the top of my head, I can't tell you every single plant, but some plants will come out and they'll flush out earlier. They may not do much except just have their green come out, but they'll flush out. So I would still say smaller in the front, mid-size, and higher in the back. So still follow that. You can mix them. You can mix however you like, but just be aware that sizing is still important in the garden.
But what about when they come in? When if one blooms earlier than another, like if a tall one blooms?
I would still put it in the back because you're still going to see it because most of the perennial plants still haven't come up enough. You know, they're still only going to be 6-8 inches high, even if they're going to eventually get 24 inches. Does that answer your question? Good, good. And does anyone have any other general specific questions? And okay, I'm wrapping up. In case you didn't notice.
The daffodils have bloomed, the tulips have bloomed, and you have this foliage that's dying back.
Yes.
I usually let it die all the way back and then pick up the dead bodies.
Yes. So the official word
It looks
is,
like-
it looks terrible. Yes, as the daffodils, tulips are much faster. Daffodils and actually Spanish bluebells to some extent take the longest for their greenery to die back. And during that period, unfortunately, they look lousy.
I braid it, I fold it and tie
Yes.
it, but
So basically, if you can cut them back as soon as they start to really fail. You don't have to wait for them. We can argue about this.
photosynthesis.
Right. We can argue about this, but you don't have to wait for them to completely brown out. You can cut them back. You can cut them back a little bit. You can cut them completely back as soon as they really fall down and start to look terrible. You're going to take a little bit of the photosynthesis away from the roots, from the plant, but you're fertilizing, and perhaps if you've planted them under deciduous trees and they're not going to get the sun anyway, it's not going to affect them very much. The Spanish bluebells, you know, the same kind of thing. These are very, very hardy bulbs, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Do what you need to do to keep everything looking really good.
Okay.
Okay? Don't jump the gun.
No.
But yeah. The lady behind you first.
Oh, I have a question about, say I want to do alums that are deeper.
Yes.
planted, Daffodils and tulips, which are middle.
Yes.
And crocuses and snowdrops on top. So am I going to dig one deep,
And you wanna
put my alums, then I'm going to put some compost, then I'm going to have my level for my tulips?
She is an advanced gardener. Yes, if you want to try to get the most out of one single spot, you can do that. You can put the allium, the really big one on the bottom, and then the mid height above that, separated out a bit, and then crocuses or something much smaller on top. You can do that. It is going to slightly affect everything because the crocuses are still going to be, there's still going to be some, some of their material left, some of their foliage left, and the same thing with the daffodils by the time the allium is going to start pushing through. So if you can separate them a little bit, I would do that. You can certainly do that. I didn't want to talk about if you were doing them in a pot, if you were forcing them. I didn't want to get into that because it's a whole other lecture. But that's definitely what people do when you're forcing them, is they layer like that and everything comes through. In a garden, it's a little more difficult to do that and have them stay looking really, really good because they will compete, and there's other things competing for all the same nutrients too. So I would consider not doing that too much.
I'm going to design it when I do it.
Exactly. Design it. There you go. Thanks for waiting.
When should you plant bulbs?
When should we plant bulbs? It's still a little too early. You want to have them in as close to frost as you can. So granted, 2 or 3 years ago, we got 8 inches of snow in October. But the ground really wasn't that cold, okay? The ground right now is not cold at all. So I usually wait until as late into October and November, and I have planted bulbs all the way to mid-December, okay? There are always anomalies. Last year, we got that super cold starting at Christmas and going through the first 2 weeks of January. Typically, though, and this is what I do, I'm out there all the time. Typically now, real winter doesn't start until mid to late January. So that November time period, and sometimes into December, is great, okay? If you are actually having trouble getting a shovel into the ground, you may have waited too long. okay? But, you know, it's still too early right now. Everybody's pushing to, as are we, we're pushing you to buy your bulbs, but it's not quite time yet. Okay? Any other questions? You're sure? You sure, everybody? Okay. All right. Thanks so much. Have some fun. We've got a decent amount in right now. I'm going to bring these right back. We have, like I said, we have groupings of 10s and 25s. The allium are all individual. The allium are very pricey. Did I mention that already? You're going to be like, wow! But they're worth it. They're worth it. Because think of it, again, as this amazing-looking perennial that you're going to have coming up. And if you price it out that way, you realize they're not that expensive at all. Yes?
Do the squirrels like allium?
No, squirrels don't like allium. They don't. It's an onion family. They won't eat those either. So, right. And the Fritillaria, which I forgot to talk about. Let me go get these. Can you give me 5 more minutes? All right, let's do it. They are. Thank you. Okay. Fritillaria. Snake's head. Some people call them snake's head. There are 2 major kinds, okay? The first ones are called imperialis, okay? They stand 24 to 36 inches. They are amazing looking. They can often be difficult to find in the different colors. They're always a bold color, oranges, reds, bright yellows. And they are, like an allium, they're an individual plant. Yes, you can plant them in groupings, but you don't need to. They stand on their own. Really exciting. Critters hate them. Can you smell them as I brought them? Can you smell? They almost smell like soft, yeah, can you smell it? What is it? Skunk. A little bit like a skunk. Some people say, yes, a little bit like a skunk. The other kind of Fritillaria is much, much smaller, okay? 8 to 10 inches. It droops over, and again, nobody likes to eat them. This is also a lovely, lovely, look at that gorgeous color, that purple, it's almost checked, okay? Here, if you want to look at it, now you're eagerly looking at that. Some of them do come in solids. That's a mixture. Some of them do come in whites as well. But they very nicely mix with a smaller tulip, even if they're shorter than the tulips, or definitely minis, any daffodils or anything like that. Those are really, really nice to add in, and they're very inexpensive. They bloom in April into May, yes. Yes. Okay. To establish. I find that you get a nice flush the first year, but yes, as the years go on, you do get better. These, though, you should get first year. The big Fritillaria, you really should get first year. So these are cool, very cool. Okay. So anything else I can go over with you? Okay. Well, I'm here all day. As are my colleagues. I hope that you do well and enjoy and get those shovels out. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Great information, and I can't wait to plant my bulbs. I am definitely adding allium at home and watch for it at Pinecrest along the border.